He said, why can't you guys understand this? This is how I've made my money, is against hospitals and docs who don't understand these basics. But if you do understand them, he said, let me tell you this. This is a fellow by the name of Frank Branson. Frank says, 93% of the cases who have made me rich would have never walked into my office to begin with if there'd been an apology and full disclosure and following of the basics of known good procedures. He says, that's how you're holding your throats out and handing me a knife. And I don't want to do this anymore. That's one of the reasons they participated. They want this to stop too. They're really on, it doesn't seem like it, but they're on our side. Let me show you this clip. It's just too much fun to ignore. It comes from a movie called The High and the Mighty, which some of you may have seen. And I talk about this and put this up because it talks about the methodologies we use in communication and a thing we call crew resource management. CRM in aviation revolutionized things. You can't just take that and drop it into medicine, but the principles are identical. The principles have to do with saying we need a collegial interactive team here. We need people who respect each other in order to get all the information that we need to be successful in whatever our endeavor is. And here in getting the passengers from point A to point B. Wasn't always that way. Matter of fact, one of the reasons that doctors and pilots are very, very similar, much more so than I think you have any idea, is because we don't worry about killing ourselves. That cockpit's never killed us before, ergo it's not going to now. We worry about diminishment professionally. We worry about the same things. We are very much cut from the same cloth, even though a completely different stratification of complexity. In this particular movie, which is a John Wayne movie, I don't know how many of you love John Wayne movies. Of course, he always played John Wayne, just with a different name. He's a captain back in 1956 of a 4-engine, piston-powered, propeller-driven DC-4. He's a very senior airline captain who is no longer employable as a captain because he's made a mistake and he had a crash. The crash didn't just kill his passengers, it also killed his wife and 2 little boys. And now he's anathema to the major airlines. But there's a second-tier carrier running this old DC-4 back and forth between Honolulu and the West Coast and Oakland that will employ him as a co-pilot. But this is the day in which the captain was God and everybody follows. And this is a really problematic situation because the guy in the left seat, played by Bob Stack at an early part of his career, is actually the captain. He's in charge, and yet he is so inexperienced compared to this first officer that if there was not already a huge barrier between the 2 seats that comes from the culture, just like the barriers that we're trying to overturn, not just in the OR and the EU, or the ED rather, in the ICU, but throughout healthcare. This barrier says a captain is God, everybody follows. And a first officer may make a suggestion, but only at his or her peril. On top of this, when you've got a guy with 25 years of experience who's also a shunned ex-captain, he needs to sit down and shut up because any word he says is going to be taken offensively by the captain. And this young captain is in serious trouble because they're past the equal time point. They can't turn around to Honolulu. They're headed to Oakland. It is a dark and stormy night. Snoopy was right. I've done 13 novels. That's always the way to do it. There are 20-foot waves down there. They've lost 2 of their 4 engines. One of them is hanging down on the mount, creating massive aerodynamic drag. They don't know if they've got enough fuel. The flight engineer is sweating bullets trying to be able to be justified in saying, yes, don't put it in the water, don't ditch, we can make it. And they've got to come over San Francisco to get to Oakland. They don't want to run out of gas any place short of the airport. John Wayne is trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do the culturally right thing of keeping his mouth shut. But 25 years of experience have taught this guy an awful lot that this green captain doesn't have the information for. And he can't ask John Wayne or he'd diminish his command. The brick wall that's between them is about as solid as you can imagine. And they're at the point of decision. This young captain has got to make a decision. He's so behind things. Events are controlling him. He's got to do something, anything. And even though he knows that if they put it in the water, they're probably all going to die, that really isn't even a part of his thinking or John Wayne's character, old Dan Roman. But let me show you the clip. This is really where our communications revolution began.
Welby, check your final position. I'm going to take her down.
Wait a few more minutes, Skipper.
Do as I say.
It looks like...
Do as I say.
Give him a few more minutes.
I've already waited too long. Here we go.
No, we don't. Here, hold yourself, you yellow.
Now, I should explain to you and you CMOs in particular, or rather CNOs, when I'm talking to a room full of OR nurses, I am very careful, surgically careful, to say this is not a recommendation. But it probably isn't comforting to know that there's always some senior nurse who comes up afterwards with her hands on her hips and says, why not? That's a good idea. You don't like the way he's doing the procedure? Slap the attending twice, knock him out of the way, dive into the sterile field, and take over. But the fact is, what we have is ownership. This is what this whole hour has been about, ownership. I am this institution. I don't just work here. You are in a very excruciatingly difficult position, but it is an incredibly opportunistic position because of the way things are changing. You have an opportunity, leading docs, leading nurses, to come in and say, we are not going to do it this way anymore. We can't. The public won't tolerate it. We won't tolerate it. We can't tolerate it. We have got to start talking to each other in ways that we never have before. You've got to let me know on the front ranks what I need to know to be able to help you do your job. Do you have what it takes to do your job? That's a key question. Most people have never even heard it. You've got a huge opportunity. But it comes from breaking the old traditional ways of doing things. It comes from steering this ship in a new direction, not steering by committee and trying to decide how to improve navigation, but to miss the iceberg in Titanic terms. That's where you are. We've got all the tools. What you're going to hear the rest of today and tomorrow are some of those tools. Many of them are tactics, but they are presented within a strategy and a philosophy that's incredibly important. And we don't have time to do anything else at this point. But that's why speaking to such an august group of folks who are in this position, who understand, is so exhilarating for me. Thank you all very, very much.